Welcome into the Wrestling with Legends podcast. We've had quite the week here. Guests galore, Brooklyn Brawler a little bit earlier, Jameson Winger. Got news in a few weeks. We'll be talking with Alundra Blaze about her new book. But today, guys, as you know, we cover NFL, NBA, MLB, but a huge wrestling fan at heart. And this is a big, exciting interview for us today. You guys knew him as Henry Godwin. Mark Canterbury, welcome to the show, sir.
How are you? Glad to be here. Also,
Oh,
Shanghai Pierce, Southern.
That's right. Glad to have you.
Yeah.
And full disclosure before we get started, we're from Cleveland, so this show is based in Cleveland. You were one of the first people to actually ride our rapid system back in the summer of 1996. They did this thing with they call it Gateway Plaza. It was brand new, and they filmed something. When you guys were in town for SummerSlam, I'll never forget it. Because I'm like, how cool did that have been for a random fan to have been on that train at the same time you were?
Yeah, I remember who rode with him. Bart.
Yeah, they were riding on the horses.
Yeah.
So, all right. Hey, we'll get started here. So I wanted to touch base. You were around for a couple years and then went into WCW, and at that time kind of created, like you said, your first character there, Shanghai Pierce. Who came up with that idea, and what was some of the inspiration behind it?
Dusty Rhodes and Barry Windham and Cowboy Bill Watts. That really Dusty. I like telling this story because Dusty was he was a sweetheart. It meant a lot to us and in our career, starting there. He loved Westerns, the old Westerns. So the gunfight of the OK Corral, that's where he got Tex Slazenger and Shanghai Pierce. They were cattlemen in the movie. So that's how we got our start with Dusty and the names, how it all started.
So, for years, and he's one of your best friends, so obviously this is not going to come as a shock. For years, a guy like the Undertaker was seen as a locker room leader in WWF. In those 2 or 3 years you were with WCW, did they have that? Did they have a locker room leader or a guy who was kind of in charge, or not really?
No, it was. I'm not saying nothing negative. I'm just saying it was day and night between WCW and WWE. But it was fun for me and Tex because we just started, we were the two young kids just coming in, but we respected everybody. We were humble, we listened, and that's how we learned. But we just had a good time down there. But when we went to WWF, it was more of an opportunity. Vince pushes the new guys and the young guys, where WCW, was bringing all the older guys back. And so it was just different time, but I enjoyed both places.
Coming into the WWF, right, in 1995, who created the Hog character and what was the inspiration behind that?
Well, when we got let go at WCW, I think it was about a month later, I had an appointment with Vince and JJ Dillon. And it was, I'd called and reached out, and then Harley Race and Kevin Nash are the ones that spoke for me to Vince. So I had a meeting with Vince and JJ that day, and went in Vince's little kayfabe office there, the Hideaway office, for about 3 hours. And Vince, asked me what I did, and I told him, drove a truck, worked on the psych floor for a few years, and we farmed. My whole family's farmed forever. So when I said that,
yeah,
it was like a light bulb went off, and he goes, well, what kind of animals you got? And I said, well, we got it all: hogs, chickens, cows. And he said, the hogs. He said, what do you do with them? I mean, what's your daily thing? I said, well, we feed them, slop them, castrate the babies, and put rings in their noses. And he said, so that's how all that took off. And he wanted the initials to be HOG. So we come up with Henry, and he gave me, it's one of his family members. It was either his grandfather or somebody. Orpheus was their name. So that's how I got the name Orpheus. Orpheus.
No, that's excellent. And as a kid, not that I was that young, I think I was like the seventh grade or whatever, but I just thought it was so creative, right? Because it just like back then, everybody had a gimmick. Even before you, there was like a Repo Man, and obviously everybody knows Doink the Clown and so on down the list. So I just thought that was so unique. It's something you're not used to seeing.
Yeah.
But you still, as a physical performer, you had to look the part and you had to get it over, which you did. And that kind of brings me to my next question. In 1995, you were fairly new to the company. You end up in the final four or final five of the Royal Rumble that year. You went pretty far into that Royal Rumble, which is, here's this new guy lasting pretty long.
I was tired. I was in there a while.
Yeah. Yeah, you were. And then a little bit later in the year, and I would encourage fans who have Peacock and the WWE Network to go back and watch some of those Superstar episodes. WWF Superstars on Saturday mornings. Mark here, he fought Diesel, he fought Bret Hart on television. Those are big deals at that time. Why do you feel like you got such a strong push that quick?
I don't know. I just again, not being loud, obnoxious, being humble, listening, because you can learn something every day, and I tried to, something different, and I think just having a good attitude and listening and being nice to others and hoping they're nice back to you and help you out, and we'll probably talk about BSK, but that's where that come into effect. It was a group of guys that hung out, loved being together, loved each other, and tried to help each other with our careers.
Yeah, absolutely, and shown in your performance. And of course, I do have a BSK question coming up here in a few, so was not going to be able to resist that. But I did want to go. The cool thing here, and this is something I've always wondered, and I honestly do not know the answer. Most of these questions I'm going to ask you today, I've got a pretty good guess on the answer. This one, I have absolutely no idea. So,
that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear the answer to this.
Yeah.
You're a really good heel. All right. You're red hot in 95. You're coming into your own as a heel. And all of a sudden, at the end of that summer, they put you in a program with the $1 Million Man, not as a wrestler, but him building that corporation. You turn on him and end up slopping him. And the next thing I know, you're a babyface. How did that decision come about to turn you babyface? And the question, the $1 million question that I can't believe I finally get a chance to ask, what was the slop? What actually did you guys do to it was a kayfabe slop? Was it real slop? How'd you do it?
You just open up a can of worms now with that. All right. So I can't exactly remember how the turn came about, but I know I was going to be in the $1 Million Stable. They turned on me. Bam Bam come out and say, help me,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Kama and Tatanka. I can't remember who all he had at the time that was beating my ass. And then Bam Bam come out. But the slop was always pretty basic. I know DiBiase got it 3 times. And after he paid for the first suit, I heard he went to the office and said, if I'm going to keep getting slopped, you're going to buy my damn suit. So I think Vince bought 2 of his suits. But anyway, the slop was always made usually at TV or a pay-per-view with whatever we had at catering. Like I used a lot of bread, a little ranch, throw some pasta in there. Just that was pretty basic. And I know Hunter was getting tired of all this because see, me and him were married for like 6 months on the road overseas. He got it every night, so he was a trooper for doing that. But that was pretty much the basics of the slop.
Yeah, again, it's funny because as a young kid, right? I'm watching this and I don't think twice about it. I'm like, that's real pig slop. Of course it is. Everything they're telling me is real, But like as you grow up as an adult and you start looking back, and I'm like, I don't know if that was, And it's funny because you mentioned like salad stuff that you would find in catering, and like every now and then I'd see like carrot shreds or whatever. I'm like,
Yeah,
oh, I'm
yeah.
like, they described a bunch of crap they had backstage and dumped it. You know, I get it. But you mentioned it a little bit earlier, right? And another thing that at the time, as a fan, it went right over my head. But now learning about you, learning about the BSK and just everybody else, that whole chunk, right? Um, at Survivor Series 95, okay, this went completely over my head at the time, but you were teamed with Savio Vega, Rikishi, and The Undertaker. And I remember looking at that team, I'm like, how in the world? I'm like, these are four completely different gimmicks. None of this makes sense, but you guys swept them. You dominated the Royals. But I'm looking at this, I'm like, that's odd. And then, like, but it wasn't until many years later that the documentaries came out. I'm like, oh, that was the BSK. Those were members of the BSK that. So just kind of talk about that. Like, did Taker or yourself or somebody go to Vince and say, hey, we want to be a team this year because there's really nothing else going on? Or how'd you pull it off?
I think Mark wanted to do, well, we all always want to do something BSK together. But I think Mark had a lot in that, who he wanted on his team, and Vince, took right with it. But that was a fun night, and it was just a tight group of guys, and a lot of people didn't realize it, like you say, that BSK back then.
Yeah, it was so well kept, right? For like a mystery from the fans. We didn't know, like, if you would have told me that Yokozuna and Kamal, or not Kamal, but Kama and Undertaker were like the best of buddies behind the scenes, I would have called you crazy. Like, how in the world could that ever be? Like, Undertaker's been trying to bury Yokozuna, you know? So it's just, again, as a fan, you don't think those things. So to learn them years later really is just the coolest feeling. And you mentioned it a second ago with Triple H. This is right around the same time where he was, early on with Hunter Hearst Helmsley.
Yeah.
Like you said, you were married to him, all those hog pen matches. What was it like to work with him? And I know you'll be honest with this answer. At that time, could you ever saw to yourself that he was going to become what he became?
No, I'll answer that right now, real quick. But no, Hunter, me and him had great chemistry. We did a show in Switzerland one night, and Kevin Nash and X Pac had come up to me and Hunter, and this is like pre-click or maybe right when a click was starting in BSK, but there was never no tiff between it. That's all bullshit. But anyway, um, yeah, uh, Hunter was a treat to work with, and we just had we just hit it off, and we've been good friends. We were friends, met in WCW actually,
Mhm.
and yeah, he was a treat to work with and very creative. I mean, when we did the hog pen match, Vince said, you got, I think we had like 30 minutes. He goes, you guys go out there and this is the day of, and see what you can do and come up with your own stuff. So that's what we did. Me and Hunter come up with everything. And that was a success. And we were, that match made it up for one of the Slammy Awards that year.
Yeah.
But it was just, yeah, Hunter's a good guy, very smart and creative.
Well, I mean,
Enjoyed it.
you could definitely see that as a fan. You could definitely, like I said, always tell when two guys have chemistry. I mean, they tried to do something with him and Duke the Dumpster Drosy, and it never worked out the way it did with you. So you could always tell when there's more talent there than maybe meets the eye. So tremendous job. A few more
Yeah.
questions for you here, and again, thank you for coming on today. We truly appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Oh yeah. And here's the next one too. And we always keep things as positive as possible. I would never bring a guest on here and say, "Hey, can you bash this person, bash that?" I can care less.
Yeah.
I don't care. Like, that's not why I wanted to talk to you. This next question kind of leads to something like that, but not really. So just bear with me. You brought in Dennis Knight, right? So now you have your teammate back with you. It's really, like I said, I loved it. I thought it was fun. The Godwins, they said you guys were cousins. Hillbilly Jim's the manager, but during that process, like right after WrestleMania 12, you started working with the Body Donnas, okay, and then the Body Donnas into the Smoking Guns. And one person who was around for that was Tammy Fytch. The fans knew her as Sunny. Did her being a part of that storyline, did it help it? Did it make it more difficult? What was she like to work with? Because everything I've read, everything I've spoke to with people said that Chris Candido was great to work with. Obviously, Tom Pritchard, I feel, is probably one of the most underrated minds in the history of wrestling. He was one of our first guests, probably one of my all-time favorite interviews. So I know they had to be decent to work with. Did she make things difficult at all?
I hear that a lot. I get that question a lot.
Okay.
Those two were awesome to work with and good guys. Matter of fact, I'll see Dr. Tom in May 13th in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. There's a big Heroes and Legends down there. But she was talented, knew what to do. It's just she made things hard, and she was hard to work with. A couple things up in the locker room, having to deal with her, and George the Animal Steel had to calm me down. I knocked one of those hand dryers off the whole wall, just broke it, and
oh man,
so George come up after the match we had with her. And yeah, she was difficult, and I thought you were going to ask about this when she got slopped and what was in the slop bucket.
What happened? I mean, I remember that quite well. But how? Talk me through that. Was she against it at first?
At about 500 times, but we come to TV that day and see Vince and Bruce Pritchard, and they go, "We got a thing. We want you to slop Sunny tonight." So I said, "Oh yeah, that's cool." And I like Tammy,
Yeah.
Business wise, she was a bitch and hard to work with, and so it was not good. But so Vince goes, y'all are going to slop Sunny tonight. So I get the bucket and I go catering, make my stuff. It's about half full. The average bucket, same size one I always carried. So I took in the locker room and I said, all the boys are in there. I said, nobody mess with this. This Sunny's getting slopped tonight.
Oh, I've heard.
So
yeah.
I walked out and I come back and it was almost to the top full, and I had left it half full. So,
oh no.
Come to find out, Razor and Kid, 1-2-3 Kid, and everybody that was dipping had, helped fill the bucket the rest of the way up. Yeah. So poor Sonny got that, and it was a curtain call. Everybody was watching from the curtain.
Yeah. Hey, I wasn't even going to ask that question, but you were around for that too. What was some of the fallout from the actual curtain call? That's not even on my list, but I'll tell you what, when you give me a piece of gold, I'm going to take it. You were there. Everybody was there. Right after WrestleMania 12. I mean, was that just so unheard of, or how did you guys react to it?
Yeah. I don't know. I have mixed emotions, but it is what it is. I don't know. I don't really know what to say about it.
I mean,
what did you?
What was that?
What did you, a fan?
I was confused, but then it was right after that I started learning. I knew, okay, I'll never use the word fake. We're not going to go down that road. But I did know that it was scripted. Okay, I mean, my parents sent me off to that when I was like 6 years old. But to that extent, you don't think in your head, okay, that the good guys and the bad guys are actually best friends behind the scenes. So seeing some of that as a kid with Kevin Nash and Scott Hall leaving and saying goodbye and all that stuff going on, two things. One, it kind of went over my head a little bit, but I was like, that's a little interesting. But two, there was no social media back then. We're talking, May of '96, and news didn't travel like it did. Like, I didn't know about it probably months after the fact.
Yep. Back then, we had pagers.
Yeah, exactly. So just a world of difference. But I wanted to ask you this too. You guys, I think I got it here. Yep. So you guys were very popular. right? And all of a sudden, yet again, you know, you're with Hillbilly Jim. It's this really cool gimmick. Legion of Doom comes back, and the next thing I know, after Legion of Doom, you guys are turned heel. Did they have something to do with that? Because they wanted to push those guys again and make them the main faces? Is that why? I know about the broken neck. I get it. But, like,
Yeah,
is that why?
I think so. I think they were going to get the push again, and honestly, you know, I missed some of that afterwards because in September of '98 we were supposed to win the belts. Let's back up. We went to Southern Justice,
Right.
and we were with Colonel Parker for a while. And then Jeff Jarrett managed us for a while. We were like his bodyguards.
Yep.
And then we were supposed to get the belts from Road Dogg and Billy Gunn for our third time that night as Southern Justice. But that was my last match. You can go back and look at that was my last match then, you know. But yeah, I was in a lot of discomfort and pain. So Vince said, well, you need to go home and go get an MRI and get checked again. So I did. And then I had to have spinal fusion. So, but that was going to be a fun gimmick, the Southern Justice, I think. And, you know, we were going to get the belts again from Road Dogg and Billy that night on Raw. But then a couple hours before, they said, you should probably go home and get checked.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank God you did. You know, hindsight always being 2020. What happens if you get dropped on your head that night? Lord knows, right? So one of those things. So I had a couple of questions left. The one thing I did want to ask you about, because you were around for it, the Montreal Screwjob, which, you know, you said you've been asked that slop bucket question probably 500 times. I'm sure you've been asked this one 5 million times. But you know, being there that night, Montreal Screwjob, what were your thoughts on it at the time it happened? Did it make you like question like Vince McMahon and the WWF at the time, or you were just like, just a hard day at the office, got to get through it?
You know, that's a good question, but I'm gonna have to say what you did. I was confused. You know, yeah, I didn't. I was having second thoughts about what they did to Brett, but you know, so much stuff happens. You don't know whether it's a work or not anymore. You know, but yeah, it was very confusing and a little saddening that the business went to that depth. You know, but tough day at the job. Let's get over it.
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah. And it's, you got to put your family first. You know, I mean, I've been in situations a little bit different. I'm way different than that, but I've been in situations where, you know, in broadcasting, where I was the color guy or I was just a stats guy, and the next thing I know, I'm the play-by-play guy, right? Which is a huge promotion, and that's kind of how I got my first break. And the guy who used to do the play-by-play won't even speak to me anymore. You know what I mean? And as much as that type of thing sucks, years later, and we're talking almost a decade later, but
Yeah.
you think, like you said, it's your job, right? Then you got to worry about your family, and you got to take care of your family, and you just, what are you going to do? You know, I think Mick Foley wrote a tremendous book. He's written like 6 books, but his first one, Mick Foley's first book, is phenomenal. And he talks about that, and he talks about he went on a 1-day protest, right? And he didn't come to Raw the next day because he was that pissed of what they did to Bret Hart. But then you start thinking to yourself, I have my own wife, I have my kids to worry about. You know, Bret Hart's a grown man. We'll get past it. So those are just different things, you know, that I've always wondered about, as to probably everybody might have had those emotions. Obviously Shawn was difficult to work with at that time. So I understand a lot of that. The one thing I did want to ask, because, you know, I love having these interviews, and I usually have them with guys from the 80s and 90s. And the only thing the fans ever say is, like, they always say, we love the interviews, but you never ask any current questions. I don't care about the current stuff. Like, I want to talk about the old days.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I just do, you know. But to appease the fans, I took 2 fan questions here, and that's how we're going to close this out. The first one being, the Undertaker streak ended at WrestleMania 30. How do you feel about Brock Lesnar being the guy chosen? Was he the right guy chosen to end the streak?
Wow. Interesting. I thought of that a couple weeks ago. Um, yeah, I think he, and I like the way they redid him, sort
Right.
of, you know. Uh, but I think Brock worked out okay for him.
How they followed it up perfectly by pushing him to the moon. He didn't lose for years after that.
Yeah, yeah, and you need somebody. If somebody's going to do that, they need to be in the business full time, not
Right.
doing other shows and movies and then coming in and everybody else has been working for a year and you're out doing movies and shit and then you come in and I don't agree with that. But I think
Right.
if you're gonna, and especially if you're gonna take the strap off Undertaker, your ass better be there day in, day out, working out and learning.
Yeah.
That's the way I feel about it.
As a fan, I couldn't agree with you more, and as a journalist, I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about it. This one, last last question for you here. And this one is from the fans as well. Gonna try to read this with a straight face.
All right.
All right. So at one point in both of your careers, both you and the Undertaker were known as Mean Mark. Who was meaner?
Uh down deep, probably me. To be honest, maybe
That's
just
great.
a smidgen more than Mark
How
behind the
creative.
scenes.
Yeah. I always teased people. I said, if I was ever a wrestler, because I played sports in high school, but I like being, like going into any kind of professional wrestling was there's no way, right? At the time, but I always would joke. I said, I'll be Vicious Vince, So I just think it was
There
too
you go.
funny, me and Mark. I mean, no
Yeah.
offense, I love you guys, but that was like the
Yeah.
corniest thing I've ever heard.
Oh yeah. It's just yeah. George South and Italian Stallion give me that name before I got my break with WCW with Dusty and Cowboy Bill Watts.
That's great.
But yeah, mean Mark. I mean, neither one of us is mean.
Right. Another quick question for you before we wrap this up, just off the top of my
Yeah.
head, because I'm a mark at heart. I'm not gonna lie. So, for the business, I would go out to
Are
the
you a mean
hotels.
Mark?
No,
Are you
I'm
a
a
mean
nice
Mark?
one. Yeah, I but I'm not above it. I'll go sit in the hotel lobbies and not the airports. I think that's ridiculous. But I'll sit in a random hotel lobby or a restaurant where I think maybe some wrestlers will show up. But I always try to be respectful, right? Number one, never bug them while they're eating. Just give them space. But if they were willing to take a picture with me, I would take a picture with them, all that good stuff. Rhea Ripley, who they are pushing the WWE right now, is pushing her to the moon. Probably going to beat Charlotte for the title at WrestleMania. She went off on
Should.
social media, about fans though, approaching her at airports and different things like that. How did you deal with that type of stuff when you were on the road? Were you? I mean, because I know you don't you're representing the business, and I get that, but at the same time, like, how do you deal with it?
Um, I'm so nice. It's hard for me to turn somebody down. But some of the guys, some of the people, I mean, they would really be dicks about signing something. But me, I'm easygoing. I like people. Um, so I would sign, and some of the people would get upset with me because I signed. They'd say, blah blah blah. I said, well, you know.
Yeah,
So it didn't bother me. As long as, if I was eating or something, I'd say, hey, when we get done, we'll do it or something. But other
yeah.
than that, I signed all the time. But yeah, I wouldn't like being like followed out through the parking lot or nothing like that.
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, the one story I'll tell, and this was years before I met my wife. I was a younger guy, I was early 20s. We were at the Marriott Hotel in Cleveland. Again, where I live here in Cleveland, Ohio. We're at the West 150th Marriott, which at the time was where a lot of you guys had stayed. You were
Yeah,
not
that
with the
sounds
company.
great.
Yeah, they called it Airport Marriott. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I'll never forget this story, and I'm gonna tell it, and I'm gonna give the guy credit because he deserves it. We were in the lobby, and there was a bunch of other people in the lobby, but they were kind of being dicks, right? They weren't being very respectful to the different wrestlers who were coming through. So this was in 2002, March of 2002. So down comes Big Show, and you could obviously spot Paul White from a mile away. So the Big Show is coming out, and somebody says something to him, and then instead of like strangling the guy, he turns to me, who was being respectful, me and my buddy, and says, I got a pizza up in my room. You guys want to come hang out? So here am I as a fan, and there's this professional wrestler inviting us up to his room to have a pizza with him and shoot the shit a little bit. And I'm like, okay, so cool experiences like that you never forget. Kurt Angle is just amazing. I remember one time as a fan, I jumped over the other side of a escalator. So Kurt's coming down this way, I'm coming up this way. I look over, I'm like, holy crap, that's Kurt Angle, right? And I remember leaping over to the other end of the escalator to go down with him. And he thought it was so funny, he took a picture. So you get things like that. The Undertaker is the only guy I ever met who wouldn't take a picture, but he couldn't.
Yeah. And I got and I got stories with fans too that I like, and I also have a few bad, things. But we've had our run-ins with fans that don't respect you. I mean, I remember we were in Worcester, Mass, doing a strap match with the Harris twins.
Yeah.
And we were going back from the ring, and somebody hit Tex in the back. I mean, punched him in the back. So my first reaction is I swung that strap and hit a fan right through here.
Sure.
But then they smoothed it out. We had like 2 charges pending against us.
Wow, for that?
Yeah, for protecting ourselves. Like one time in Chicago, a guy spit right in my face at ringside.
That's
ridiculous. I just reached and grabbed him, pulled him over the railing, and back then it was all the police volunteered, the firefighters, so we had some jacked up security, and they took this guy out back and worked him over. So I mean, things have changed a lot now, but that's the way it was back then.
Like I said, social media, it brought us together today, so I appreciate social media. I get it. But it does a lot of evil in today's world. And it's like, if you say one wrong thing to somebody, like you said, if you put your hand on somebody nowadays, a million people are right there with their phones. A couple of weeks ago, they had LeBron James break the record. And being from Cleveland, I have very mixed emotions about LeBron James. Not a huge fan, regardless. He breaks that record, and they showed the crowd, and everybody but like one guy has their phone out. You know what I mean? So they're watching this historic moment through a phone, and it's like, you know what? You probably paid a couple grand for that ticket. Why wouldn't you just sit there and enjoy the moment? But
that's what I would have done.
That's just me. That's just you get that. So real quick, as we're almost out of time, where can fans get a hold of you? Where can they follow you, show up at the events, get autographs? How can they support you?
My Instagram is Henry Godwin. So I'm on that a lot. Next week we're going to LA for WrestleCon, and then I think we're going to go to Undertaker's one-man show on Friday night. So we have a little BSK reunion, and I think Savio's coming in, and Rikishi, Godfather, me and Phineas and Taker. So it'll be a good time.
I love that you guys did that. They called Table for 3.
Did you see the round table?
Yeah, but you were all there. It was way more than 3, and Phineas got there late. I was just laughing.
Yeah,
I thought
but that was a great time, and every time I watch it, I laugh more and more.
Yeah. Well,
the stories about Paul Bear are just, I love Paul.
I don't know. I wish we had more time. See, the whole problem with Zoom interviews is they can only go 40 minutes and then it cuts you off. I forget who I was talking to. I think it might have been I don't remember now. It was really, really good. Bartlett. Rob Bartlett, who was like the color guy for Raw. And he kept going and going, and I was trying to wrap up, and I couldn't. And the Zoom thing, that same thing we're on right now, cut him off, and I felt so bad. I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
God, I'm like, this guy's gonna think. But I
Well, I
mean,
want to show you a couple of things real
yeah,
quick.
hurry up, please go right ahead.
This is my Undertaker drag car.
Oh, nice.
A fan give me this car. Undertaker give me this in '96. That drag car. Can you see it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, sir.
Got some other cool stuff real quick. Of course, our figurines.
Oh yeah.
Me and Hunter in the hog pen match. An artist just did this. Can you
Oh, that's
see it?
awesome. Yeah.
That's it. That's me and Phineas meshed together.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And this is a cartoon of the BSK.
That's incredible. Man, people are talented. That's awesome.
And the match you were talking about, here it is. The Survivor Series.
Oh, right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. When things settle down, you're always welcome to come back on early summer or whatever, when you get past through the Mania stuff. I don't want to ever monopolize anybody's time, but I mean, like you said, you probably got a million stories you would love to tell, and I'll tell you what, we would love to hear them. So we'll have to talk again.
Get a hold of me and we'll do it again. Maybe we get Phineas on here or something.
That would be great to have both of you guys on together. Would be awesome.
Yeah,
for sure. So thank you again so much. I appreciate it. As I've always said, when I first reach out to a professional wrestler, I just always try to make it clear. I'm a journalist. This is a real thing.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
You got probably people just, like I said, anybody gets your information, all of a sudden they're whatever. So I appreciate it. And we'll definitely talk again. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Stay in touch, man.
No problem. God bless. I will. Thank you.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye now.